All right, looks like we are live. Let me go ahead and share this really quickly while everyone joins. Not everyone, just my live viewers for today. Hey, Sarah. Okay, good. Some have joined already, so let's go ahead and get into this. This is actually because my husband was preaching last night on basically culture in the church. What we do in the church that's culturally driven versus doctrinally driven. And it got me to thinking about how first generation Christians, second generation Christians oftentimes want to change some of the culture that's in their home from when they're growing up. Because, let's just admit it, every home has a different culture. We all have different ideals, we all have different things that we focus on. And we were all raised differently. And some of us, especially the ones that watch my show, were raised in Christian homes, but some weren't. And that's how a lot of ladies find my show. I even have ladies that watch it that aren't Christians. So, my goal is that hopefully it'll get them thinking positively about the things of the Lord and that they'll, eventually want to know him, and believe on him for salvation and all that. So I encourage everyone to watch the show if they're going to be able to glean some sort of truth from it, whether you're saved, whether you're even a hater. Hey, maybe something I will say will impact you for the good. So it's all good. It's all good. Some of us were raised in Christian homes, some of us weren't. Some of us were raised in homes that had a ton of yelling, maybe even abuse. I was not raised in an abusive home, but I have talked to ladies who were. And abuse in the form of even emotional and um, emotionally manipulative, emotionally abusive, horrible things were said to them. And oftentimes, the voice that we hear as we're being raised is often the voice, even as adults, that we have playing in our head, in our heart. And, we can change that for our children. So, some were raised in a home that was just, quite frankly, a nightmare. It wasn't a source of peace. I stumbled on this reel by this girl. I know nothing about this girl. I can't even remember what her name was, but I stumbled on it last night, and she's written a book, and she was showing different snippets of her life growing up in a cult. She was wearing a head doily thing for a head covering. So I don't know. And her dresses looked very like Amish-ish, but she wasn't Amish. It wasn't like a Amish head covering she was wearing. It almost looked like these people that go into the head covering culture and they also kind of adopt like Amish type dress. So that's kind of what it appeared to be. But she was telling horror stories basically in these little shorts about being raised in this home. And she was definitely put through the ringer when it comes to things. And now she's obviously gotten out of that. And she's written a book. So I don't know anything about the book. It looked kind of interesting to me. That's the type of thing I like to read. So I clicked through on the link and I might order it just to read it, but it looked interesting to me. But, her home was not a source of peace. It was a source of turmoil all the time. I think the one at the head of things was her dad. That was the driving force behind all of it. But for some, it might be their mom, it might be a family member or whatever. So one thing I've attempted to do in my own life is to take the bad and to do differently with the bad things that have happened in my life. I try to learn from it. I try to glean wisdom on how not to be. That's kind of the mindset. I don't ever want to think of myself as a victim when bad things have happened. And I also don't want my children to think of themselves as victims, because we're all going to have bad things that happen. We're all going to have friendships that go sour. We're all going to have toxic people in our life. And when I say toxic, I'm not saying that in a flippant way. I don't think everyone that I cross paths with is toxic. I do think there's a little bit too much emphasis, and I'll do a show about this soon, but I do think that there's a little bit too much emphasis on boundaries and, all these toxic people in your life. It's very rare that someone's actually clinically diagnosed with narcissism. And I have ran into some narcissists in my life, but it is few and far between. Most of us have the intention of being better and, working on ourselves as the years go on. Most of us have that intention. So I'm very careful to put a label on someone like narcissist or, whatever it may be. So, but I try to use the bad that has happened in my life with anything regarding anything, and I try to do things differently. So I've applied this to my marriage. I've studied those who have good marriages, and I've implemented in my life what I wanted. And I've also studied people who don't have good marriages, and I have avoided doing those same things in my marriage. And the same with raising children. I've studied those who have raised good children, and I've tried to implement the tips and tricks they give me. And I have studied those who have raised bad children, and I try to do opposite of what they have done. So maybe you all want a different culture from what you were raised in. And where do you start with this when it comes to this? So, hey, Angie, Glad, and Nicole, Celine, Marta. Yeah, a lot of people, my dad actually came out of the Catholic culture. He was raised Catholic. And when him and my mom got married, it was about a year into their marriage, a little longer because, no, it was about 2 years into their marriage because I was one when my mom got saved. And my mom had always known that something was missing. And she was always searching. Like, she was very rebellious as a teenager. She was in the 70s culture. So she was always searching. She always had a void. And she thought getting married and having a kid would fix that. Well, she got married to my dad, and surprise, surprise, it did not fill that void that was there. And here in town, actually right down the road, half a mile down the road, was Harvest Time Bible Church. And my aunt was going there, and she ended up getting saved through that church. And both her and my mom were raised in a Lutheran household. So she came over with another friend, and they witnessed to my mom. I was 1 year old. My mom at the time was considering leaving my dad because marriage wasn't what it was cracked up to be. Having a kid wasn't what it was cracked up to be. So she was going to take me, and she was going to leave my dad and continue searching for something to fill that void. Well, she rejected the gospel, first of all, when they gave it to her, and they left, but she couldn't get it out of her mind. So she just kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And I think about a day later, she gave in and she accepted the Lord. She believed on the Lord Jesus Christ for salvation. And that shaped my whole life changing. And so my mom she did like a 180, like she got saved and suddenly she started getting rid of the sin in her life, whether that was drug use or alcohol use or whatever it was, she started getting rid of it. My dad noticed, and I don't know if they ended up going to the church or my aunt and that soul winner came back over, and my dad ended up getting saved as well. So he went from Catholic to Baptist, and we started attending Harvest Time Bible Church. That's where I got saved and baptized at. And until we had moved, and then we started attending another Baptist church, and then finally an IFB church. And that's where most of my culture, me personally, comes from. I was raised IFB for the most part from the time I was about 5. And IFB is a culture. Being a Catholic is a culture. Being Lutheran is a culture. And being cultural doesn't make it bad, but it is, there are differences in different cultures, right? So when he became a Baptist, that completely changed the culture in the home. He grew up drinking. I think he had his first drink when he was an altar boy, when he was like 11 or 12. So he had been drinking since the time he was a kid, basically. And my Catholic family are still big drinkers. And so because we became Baptist, they got saved, we became Baptist, and changes started happening. And my family noticed. Well, my dad was able to lead a couple of his siblings to the Lord. He's from a family of 12 siblings, so he had a lot of siblings. And almost all my mom's, I'm pretty sure all my mom's siblings ended up getting saved too. So that changed the trajectory of our life, which then has further changed generations down the road. So you have the ability to change the way that your children go. Don't have a Catholic bone in my body. I was raised IFB. That's how my husband and I are raising our children, is IFB. We are never going to have alcohol in our house. I've never drank. He's never drank. We've never done drugs. We've never smoked. All that stuff is part of our culture and who we are. But my mom and dad had to start changing that for me, for us, for all my siblings. So they had to make a solid decision, like, we're changing the direction of our home. And you definitely can do this. So figure out, first of all, which culture you want in your home. Do you want, you need to be on the same page as your husband. If he wants you to have a culture with no alcohol, no drugs of any kind, what type of music is being piped through your home, he needs to you both need to be on the same page together. And that's why I'm going to throw this out there. It's so important before you even get married to have these discussions. Have the discussions. How many kids do we want? Have the discussion. Do we want to homeschool them? Do we want to send them to Christian school? Do we want to send them to public school? Am I going to work once we have kids? Because being a working mom, you're going to have a different culture than a stay-at-home mom. It's all going to be different. So you need to talk with whoever you're going to marry about all this stuff so that you can be on the same page, because it's going to be really hard having the same ideals, the same culture, if you're both on completely different planets when it comes to this. So definitely, be on the same page as your husband. Figure out what your priorities are. Okay. When my husband and I got married, we were completely on board 100%. I've been a stay-at-home mom since the beginning. He knew he would always be the provider. He would be the one paying the bills. He wanted me to raise our children. We wanted the stay-at-home mom homeschooling culture, or at the very least, Christian school. My husband actually was the principal over a Christian school for about 10 years in our church, but it was like a ACE school. So it was a little bit different than like traditional Christian school. All the kids were in one big room, and the moms were the ones that came in and volunteered to help out one day a week. So it's kind of like a big homeschool, basically, is how they ran that. So that was our goal. Our goal was we would always raise our kids in church. Our goal was we want them to get saved at a young age. We want them raised in the things of the Lord. We had a big picture. We wanted them to get to the marriage ultra pure. We wanted them to stay married to whoever they ended up married. No divorce. We determined there would not be divorce with us. All these things played into this. We were both very, very set in what we wanted, and we had visions for our family. And this isn't something too that just happens overnight when you decide this is how I want my family to be. No, this is like decision upon decision upon decision upon choice. This is years in the making. It takes years for someone's fruit in the home to come out. It takes years, at least 18 years for that fruit to come out. And your fruit will be shown. Your kids are going to say exactly how it was being raised in your home someday. I feel like a lot of parents forget that. Like, they think their kids are just going to grow up and, carry on the facade that they're trying to put forth. Because if you're a hypocrite, your kids are going to see it, and they're going to be the ones to tell everyone. So what is the atmosphere that you want in your home? Do you want a peaceful atmosphere? Do you want a joyful atmosphere? Do you want one filled with anger and strife and chaos and fighting and, all this other stuff? What kind of atmosphere do you want in your home? And then what values do you want your kids to have? So here were some of the values that my husband and I wanted to impart. First of all, we have been praying, and so far all of our children, except our baby, she's only 4, have called on the Lord for salvation. So all the way down past Kelly. So we're down to Hannah, the youngest. She's the only one who has it. And chances are, I'm not a Calvinist. I don't think that it's automatically going to happen if they're born into a Christian home. But when you have your children around the things of the Lord their entire lives, when they go with you soul winning and they're hearing you present the gospel over and over and over again, chances are their heart is going to be tender, because most children's hearts are tender to the things of the Lord, and they're also going to want to call upon the Lord for salvation. So it's happened pretty young with all of our kids, but that was our prayer, was that all our children would be saved. Also, we wanted to raise honest kids. We wanted to raise kids with hard or good work ethics. So we wanted hard workers when it came to our boys and our girls. Girls need to be hard workers too, because even if they only stay at home and raise their children, it's the hardest work I've ever done in my life. So they need to be hard workers. We wanted kind kids. We didn't want kids that were bullies. We didn't want them picking on people for things that were out of their control, whether that's physical features or physical disabilities, the way they talk, the way they walk, different things like that. We came down hard on our kids if we saw any type of bullying. We did not like that. I still don't like that. And we're still raising kids. So that's still a big, big deal. And then we also, it's really hard in the day and age that we live in to raise children who are thankful, who have gratitude. And that's important too, because we're raising a generation of entitled type influencer type, I deserve everything type kids, right? So we really wanted to raise kids who were thankful, who didn't take things for granted, who didn't expect everything. We have a term for it in our house. We say we do not want to raise a bunch of little Verucas because we're big Willy Wonka fans. So we did not want a bunch of little Verucas running around in our home. So from the time they're little, we have tried to teach them to say please and thank you, to be thankful for what they get, to not complain, to say no. A lot of kids are never even told no. So that means every time we go through the line in the store, they don't get a candy bar or whatever it is. Sometimes, yes, they do. Sometimes they get candy. But other times I tell them no, just because I want them to learn not to have meltdowns, especially when I tell them no, because we all get told no at different times. Even as adults, we're going to get told no. So they need to learn how to deal with that. How do you want people to feel when they walk into your home? Do you want them to feel welcome, at peace, joyful, calm? There's some homes, and it's been in times past, like no one I know now, but where I've walked in and it's like instant anxiety, right? Maybe there's a lot of yelling, there's a lot of shouting, there's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of things like that is just that, contribute to stressful feelings or anxious feelings or whatever. There's name calling, there's cursing, there's, rock music blaring in the background. There's just a feeling. And what kind of feeling do you want people to get when they walk into your home? And anyone who knows me knows that my home is not a home where perfection abounds. Okay. It's very lived in. We live in a very small home for all the people in our family, but it's a functional home. It's as clean as it's going to get with all the people living in our home. It's lived in, but it's comfortable. It's peaceful. Because it's smaller, I feel like it's cozier. I don't know. I like my cozy little home. I love it. We have bookshelves lining the walls with tons of books. That's one of my favorite parts about this house. And we have a fireplace, and I try to decorate it cute. And we have nice color selections throughout the house. There's a lot that you can do with what you're given. You can make your home into a cozy home, but more than just paint on the walls and books lining shelves on the walls is that feeling of peace and that feeling of comfort. And I always want the McMurtry home to be a very welcoming home to those that visit. I don't want them to feel on edge. I don't want them to feel stressed out. I don't want them to feel like they have to walk on eggshells. So we really strive to be hospitable, like the Bible commands of bishops, and to be hospitable and to have a welcoming atmosphere. And I want that for my family too, not just for visitors. I want that for my family. If you want some things to change, if you want to change the culture, then you have to be the change. Okay. We can sit around all day thinking about what we would like to change, what needs to change, but until we are that change, it's not going to happen. Hello, Raquel. I'm so glad to see you in the chat. I'm glad that you are joining us for the live. If you were raised in a home with yelling, then be that change. And I'm going to tell you, it's very hard when you're raised in an environment where yelling is the first recourse. And it's hard not to fall into that pattern yourself as a mom. Whatever patterns your mom did with you, it's hard not to fall into that same pattern, but it can be reversed. You can change. And one of the things that you just need to do is you need to be very intentional about it. All right. So I can fall into this pattern of yelling if I don't watch it, because you get frustrated, right? And you feel like the only way they're going to listen is if I yell. Well, you've trained them to be that way. I've trained them to be that way. So I have to intentionally think, first of all, if you feel like you're on the verge of yelling, walk away. Walk away for a minute. I'm hearing weird noises. So if I get murdered, someone did it. If you hear, if you if you feel like you're about to yell, walk away. Take a minute, tell yourself you don't have to yell. And then what I do is I calmly, it's mainly the babies, babies are Lana and my 11-year-old. Someone is here. I think it's Abby. I'm hoping. I'm hoping Abby is here cleaning. I'm going to text her and see if she's cleaning because I'm a little worried now. Walk away, take a minute, and then grab your breath, and then calmly and intentionally sit the kids down and tell them what you need them to know. I'm going to ask Abby if she's here cleaning. I feel like I hear the mop thing, but I'm just making sure it's not an axe murderer in the other room. A friend said recently, yelling is not the way to be heard. I think it's Abby, Sarah. Yes, that's true, because oftentimes with our children, when we've trained them to only respond to yelling, they know that they have a certain amount of time, right? Like, I don't have to listen to mom until she starts yelling. So then we've trained them to only respond to yelling. So I know with me, if I feel myself on the verge, walking away helps. And then just sitting down and telling myself, you don't have to give in to this. Okay. You don't have to give in to these feelings. You don't have to give in to this, whatever it is. So, oh yeah, Abby's here. She arrived at the church 17 minutes ago, according to Life 360. So I think I'm safe, guys. I don't think a murderer is going to kill me. Although I do have some pretty good haters. So if I get accidentally unalived, it wasn't me. It was a hater. Just so that's out there publicly. So, if you are constantly afraid of your parents' temper, then you need to be the change. You need to learn to communicate in an effective way where your temper is not going to explode. I know for me, if I don't deal with something with some type of confrontation right away, it has the potential to build up in me and build up in me and build up in me. And then I feel like when you have a temper that just overflows, it's a result of feeling not heard, or feeling like you're being overlooked somehow as far as your feelings go, or you're not being seen, you're not being heard. And so that's why I try to kind of deal with conflict in my life right away before it gets to that point, because I like to be in control of my emotions. I would say I'm very much in control of my emotions most of the time. I'm not a crier. I don't get that emotional, but I will say my emotion comes out in the form of anger. And so I have to really, really watch that. And I'm just being honest with you with my faults, because my kids would tell you anyways that, yeah, who's going to be the one that's going to flip her lid first, mom or dad? And they would say, definitely mom, because they're with me all the time. I'm the one who has the potential to get riled up more than my husband does. But I will say, when dad speaks, they listen very well. So what I've learned, my arsenal of tricks, is that if there is a real problem that needs to be addressed, I will go to my husband and I'll be like, listen, I'm out of tips for this situation. Can you please help out? And then he will step in, he will have a serious talk, and things tend to get better after that. But I will say, in the times past, when I flipped the lid and I have responded in anger, they get closed off immediately. And I remember growing up, I hated that. So it has really been one thing I've been trying to intentionally work on, and I'm not perfect, and I still slip and I still fall, but I'm telling you, the parenting instances that have worked out the best are the ones where I calmly addressed it. No anger, no yelling, nothing, just very, very calm, had a discussion. And I feel like even with our children, they're human beings, right? They're just younger human beings. So they want to be treated the same way we want to be treated. And they want to be treated with respect and not freaked out on, not yelled at. Think of how we would feel if we were out in public and we were being yelled at by some person. We don't like that feeling. So we need to show our kids the same respect. So yeah, you know what, Emily? My husband hates it too. My husband hates yelling. He hates it. He literally hates it. And if anyone knows my husband, they'll know he's not a yeller. He doesn't lose his temper. He is a very calm man, and he just expects our house to be that way. So if there is any time where I'm frustrated and it's coming out in the form of my voice being too loud, he'll actually tell me to knock it off. So he does not like yelling, and I will listen to him. I personally don't like it very much when I yell either. And, sometimes it just happens, but I do try to watch that. So if you were stressed out all the time as a kid, be the change and don't stress your kids out. One thing you got to look for, and I've been prone to this, is anytime I've been stressed out or anxious or nervous, I get stomach aches. It affects my stomach. And so if I have a child that has a stomach ache, I always try to dig further. Sometimes it could be a food allergy. It could be something that they're eating. But I do know that my children that are more prone to anxiety are the ones who get stomach aches. So that can be a sign as a mom that maybe we're being a little too uptight. Maybe we're putting too much pressure on our kids. Maybe our expectations are a little bit too high. So that can be an indication that we need to just chill a little. If you had to walk on eggshells growing up, then you be the change for your kids. Like I said, I don't want a cold home in the aspect of the atmosphere of my home. I don't want the atmosphere of my home to be cold, to be chilling, to be void of love, have people on edge, to have people feel like they have to walk on eggshells. So we have to be the change as mamas. We carry a lot of the weight when it comes to the atmosphere of the home. If we are yelling, if we're stressed out, if we are angry, that's going to manifest itself in our kids. And oftentimes we'll see that behavior and it trickles down the line, right? So we'll start seeing the older one act that way towards the one right below them. And then if you're like me and you have a bunch of kids in a line, it just goes down the line until then you've got the next to last one doing it to the baby. And then the baby has no one below them. So they'll pick on the cat. You just kind of see like the progression. And your moods do directly affect the climate in your home. They affect the climate with your husband. No husband wants to come home to a wife that's freaking out. And the atmosphere is like everyone's crying and it's chaos and everyone's fighting and there's just anger and stress. And no husband wants to come home to that. And as moms, we don't want to have that atmosphere in our home, right? At least I don't. I don't know if you want it. I don't know who would say they want that, but we do control the climate in our home a lot. If you want a better marriage than your parents, then you be the change. Okay. So you make your marriage work. You decide this is D word, divorce, never uttered in our home. Like, we're going to figure this out. You're mad at each other one day. You know what? Go to bed and wake up and try again. Neither one of you are going anywhere. If your family growing up was known for bad traits, then you be the change. You change the reputation of your family name. You change the way that people in the community think about you. Your family name doesn't define who you are. You can make better choices. If your dad was a drunk, you don't have to be a drunk. If your mom, was a loose woman, you don't have to be a loose woman. If your mom was just fly off the handle, freaking out, fits of temper, you don't have to be that way. You can change. That being said, though, sometimes the family name does carry some pressure as the fact that you don't want to dishonor that name. And I know for our family, we will say things, and this is kind of big, like in countries like Japan, not so much in the Western world, although I do think it should be, because even in the Bible, the family name was pretty important, and there was important things that happened because of your family name or, whatever. So I do feel like Americans probably don't put as much weight on this as other cultures do, like Japanese cultures, maybe Chinese cultures. But for our kids, we'll say things like, you're a McMurtry. McMurtries don't act like that. Like you're a McMurtry. McMurtries don't drink. We don't touch alcohol. We don't even look at alcohol. Like you're a McMurtry. And so there's certain things that come with having the McMurtry name. You're a McMurtry. You don't talk like that. Like you're a McMurtry. You don't curse. You're a McMurtry. You don't use God's name that way. You're a McMurtry. And so we expect our kids to, because of their last name, because of the family that they're from, because of the way that they've been raised, we expect certain things out of them that I wouldn't expect like out of a Shepherd kid or a Turner kid or a Matthew kid, because they're not my kids. They're not being raised in my home, but I do expect it from mine. So you have to be intentional about changing the culture in your home. From whatever it was when you were growing up, you have to be intentional with your own kids. You have to make a plan and stick with it. If you're the type that likes writing things down, I know some families, they write down like family goals, or they'll have like a family mission statement. To us, that's not really us. We're not going to do that really. Or they'll have like the family rules on the wall or something. So that's not really something that we do in our home. However, if that is something, maybe it's almost kind of like renewing your vows. Maybe you were saved after you started having kids, and your kids are like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you're like, you know what? You sit them down and we're saved now and we're Christians now. And because we are disciples of Jesus now, we're going to change some things in our home. We're throwing out our alcohol. We're getting rid of our smoking. We're not doing drugs anymore. We're going to be careful about the type of influences we allow in our home, such as TV or shows or whatever. We're not going to listen to rock music anymore. We're not going to do this, whatever it is. Come up with a mission statement and say, the McMurtry family, these are the things that we abide by. We put Jesus in the center of everything. We want to do everything that's honoring to him, such as when it comes to the way we live, the way we dress, the music we listen to, the movies we watch. So we're a Jesus follower, and this is what we are going to do. That might be good for you, just as a way for your kids to see that you're serious about changing. And then even if you put it on the wall, you can get something nice made up and put it on the wall. It's a visual. They can see it there. For my kids, they've always been raised in that. From the time they were little, we're telling them things. We're showing them through our own life, right? We're living our life and they're seeing it. So it's not as big of a deal for us, but maybe that's something that's up your alley and you want to do it. Be consistent about whatever you decide to do. I've seen so many families who raise very confused children because they're constantly flip-flopping everything. One day they're wearing skirts. The next day they're wearing bikinis in public. One day they're wearing head coverings. The next day they're, shaving off all their hair. It seems like a stretch, but no, there's literally, I've watched because they're just thrown around with every wind of doctrine. So whatever you come up with, whatever you and your husband decide, whatever path you're going to take, be consistent with that. I've actually seen a lot of what we would consider liberal as far as like standard preferences, different things like that. I've seen liberal families that have raised good, godly Christian kids, more so than the ones that were hardcore and beat their chest about it, but they constantly flip-flopped. Like they're hardcore about dresses one day, and then they're hardcore, well, we have liberty in Christ, so it doesn't matter what we wear another day. And then they're hardcore against rock music one day, and then they're hardcore, well, anything goes, you can listen to whatever, it doesn't impact you or whatever. So they're just constantly flip-flopping. Their kids have no idea what they believe. They're saying one thing and doing another and changing. And, the one that has the more loose standards, but they're consistent about it, they tend to raise better children than the ones who are not, that are constantly flip-flopping, don't know what they believe, et cetera, et cetera. So if you had a chaotic home growing up, be the change. Implement schedules, routine, and order. One thing that my father-in-law always said was when he was growing up, he saw a lot of preachers who, with their families, every 3 to 5 years, they would move to another church. They'd move states to another church. They'd take a pastorate in Arkansas, then they'd take a pastorate in Illinois, then they'd take a pastorate in Texas, and, whatever it was. And he said, I determined that I was not going to do that with my children. And so he pastored one church in Spring Valley for a year or two, not very long, until he started Lighthouse Baptist Church in LaSalle. And that's where he still is. He's still there. So he determined I'm going to have and his family also moved around a lot when he was growing up, and he hated it because he would make friends at this school or wherever he was, and then they move. And then he made friends here and they move. And there was like no consistent church that they went to that he was raised in, and he did not want that for his kids. So he changed his culture. And now my husband has adopted the same mindset. We've lived in Illinois our entire lives, and we probably always will. And I don't care if Illinois gets a bad rap. It's home. It's home for us. We survive. We make it. We're what you would consider median income or lower income for family size, especially. We're like lower income, but the church takes good care of us as much as they can. But we still have to be careful, right? But if you live in rural country like we can, you can make it work. You can make it work whatever state you live in. And Illinois is not Chicago. Illinois is what I think of as rural towns everywhere. And fun fact, the majority of Illinois is a red state. It's just because of Chicago and like Champaign and Springfield that we are a blue state. They are the ones that determine how the voting goes. They're the ones that determine the new laws. They're the ones that push all the taxes. So, but it's the farmers of Illinois that are the majority of the state. And so when I think of Illinois, I think of cornfields and rolling hills and green and woods and, all these other things. So that's what I think of Illinois. But my husband determined we would also be the same. So we've only been in 2 churches in our 25 years of marriage. We've only been at Lighthouse and we've been here. That's it. And we'll probably be here for the rest of our lives because our kids are getting married here. They're starting families here, and you can thrive in whatever state that you're in. And it's Illinois for us, and it probably will be forever. So, but part of the chaos that comes in a home is if you're constantly uprooting your kids. Uprooting them, moving here, trying this, uprooting, moving them here, trying this. Even if it's for like a good church, you have to be really careful, be very sure, and then just determine we're going to put roots down, we're going to get established, we're going to dig in, and we're going to be here, longer than 3 to 5 years. That seems to be the kind of average. If your mom was unreliable or if your dad was unreliable, then you be reliable. You be the reliable one. You can be there for your kids. You can be calm. You can be steady. You can be the constant. So yes, exactly, Janello. Settle and thrive. You can't thrive as a family if you keep moving churches or states every few years. And you really can't, because you're not establishing, first of all, those deep-rooted friendships. Friendships take a long time to really take root and grow. It all comes down to relationships, right? You're not establishing those deep relationships when you're constantly uprooting and moving constantly. So, yeah. And then she said, African cultures are big on family names too. You can bring shame to the family by your words or actions. And, even in America, you can as well. My kids are a reflection of their dad and I, as much as they might not like that, they are. And I do know that my kids take that seriously. And, they're pretty careful for the most part about, just not bringing shame to their dad or not bringing shame to me, because they all do love us and they care for us and they don't want to, hurt us in any way. So I think that's a good thing in a way, come up with family rules and a family vision, if that helps. And I kind of just already went over that, but you be the leader, whether you're a wife for your kids, for the mom for your kids, you be the leader that you didn't have. So once again, it's taking those things that were lacking when you were growing up as a kid, and it's becoming stronger in those things for your own children, and that being said, there's going to be shortcomings. My kids could tell you I have shortcomings. They could tell you that I have areas where I need to grow, but I do think that if you are a Christian with a good heart, and you realize that you're human and you have mistakes and you have faults, and you don't act like you're God's gift to mankind or God's gift to your children are God's gift to you. But, if you don't act like you're just the best thing since sliced bread, right? Then we all have room to grow. And I think our children will accept that we have faults if we're willing to work on those faults, and if we're willing to see things from their point of view, and if we're willing to admit that we don't have it all together. No one likes someone that thinks that they have it all together. They want to knock them down a peg or two, right? So Humility goes a long way in marriage. Humility goes a long way with raising children. Humility goes a long way in friendships. Humility goes a long way in life. So, for the men, you be the spiritual leader. If you had a dad maybe that lacked clarity or really didn't lead the family, and your mom kind of steamrolled him and took over and ran the family and all the spiritual decisions, then you be the man of your house. You step up and you lead your wife, and your kids. And then women, follow your husband's lead. I've seen some of the in my life, some of the bossiest women who basically were beating their husbands over the head with the Bible, demanding that they lead. Well, even I think looking back, there were probably instances where that husband did try to lead, but he did something that his wife didn't agree with. And she threw a fit, and she made his life a nightmare because he chose to do something differently than she wanted. And because of that, I think most men, after they've tried and tried and tried, and their wife bucks them with everything in them and causes their life to be a nightmare for like 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is, they throw up their hands and they say, I'm done. Fine. You make the decision. If it's not what you want, you make the decision. So you have to be careful as women. If your husband's going to lead, you need to follow him. You follow his lead. Just remember, though, when he's gone working, you rule the roost. So you also have spiritual things happening in the house the whole day. You're going to be with the children most of the time. Out of the families that I have seen that have raised good children, I really look up to and respect the women the most because I'm also a woman and I'm a wife, and I know just how much time us women spend with our children. We really shape a lot of things, whether that comes to how our children feel about themselves, how close is their walk with the Lord. Now, I'm not saying everything rests solely on the mom's shoulders if the kids go wayward or they become prodigal, but we have a lot of influence in our home. And the ones that I've seen that have raised good children, that mom is a pillar in the home, and she is a guiding light in that home. And she is a Proverbs 31 woman, and she is on top of things. And she is really watching us moms. We can tell when there's something off with our kids' spirit. We can tell when there's something going on. Oftentimes in our life, I've brought a problem to my husband. I'll say, one of our kids is struggling and I don't know with what. And he's like, what? Really? They seem fine. I'm like, no, they're struggling. And literally from the time I sense that, it's within a week that they've come to me and they've been like, I need to talk to you about something. Something's going on. I need to talk to you. And oftentimes it's just a small problem. Oftentimes it's, I want to change what I'm doing in this area of my life. I want to do this, I need to make this decision, whatever it is. It's never been anything like horrible or bad, but I can tell us moms are very sensitive to our children. We know what's going on in their hearts. We can tell if the spirit's off, oftentimes way before dad can. So we are at the helm of the ship. Our husband is the captain, but we're guiding it a lot. And, don't underestimate the power of a praying woman. Don't underestimate the influence and just the spiritual influence that you have in your children's life. It is huge. It's huge because we're with them all the time. So, have godly music playing. This is something that I do. Alexa's great for this. We'll say, hey, Alexa, play Golden State Baptist College music. Hey, Alexa, play Hiles Anderson Baptist College. Those are the type of songs. And we'll even have fun. Like when I'm cleaning, I was cleaning my basement this week. Hey, Alexa, play songs from the Newsies. Hey, Alexa, play songs from Encanto, the musical, the Disney musical. They have some fun songs. So, we'll listen to fun songs when we're cleaning. Sometimes I just want reflective music playing, so be careful of music, movies that you have in your home. Do devotionals or Proverbs readings with your kids. If you really want to get that spiritual, application out there, make sure you have them in church. Free to thrive, right? I firmly believe in that. So we're in church unless one of us is puking our guts out, we're in church. It's just, that's part of our culture. I wanted my kids to be raised in church. When I was being raised, it was not as much a part of my culture. And even as a teenager, it bothered me. I grew up going to IFB camps and IFB conferences, and it was drilled in my head. You need to be in church whenever the doors are open. And I agree with that. I agree with that because there might be some life-changing sermon that you tend to miss if you just lay out for, I'm tired. I have headache. I've gone to church with headaches. I've gone to church tired. The only thing I won't go for is if I'm running a fever, I'm going to get someone else sick or I'm puking or something like that. But I very rarely even get sick anymore. So yes, if I'm contagious, I'm going to stay home. But how many of us, when we miss a service, we even go back and watch a live stream? And even watching a live stream is not as impactful as being there and hearing it live, right? So I had this drilled in my head, and my mom was one who didn't really take church as seriously as I did. And I think now she like goes once a week. I'm not sure. And I'm not bashing my mom in any way for this. This just wasn't high on her priority list. Okay. So, um, but I remember many times where man, I just wanted to be in church. Like I felt like I was missing so much. And she's like, no, we're staying home tonight or whatever. So I determined with my children, it was not going to be that way. Like when I had a family, when I grew up, because from the time I was little, I've wanted to be a missionary's wife. I wanted to be a pastor's wife. I love the church and I still do. I love the church. I love people. I love other Christians and I love being involved in the Lord's work. And so I always wanted, that was my heart. That was in my heart from the time I was like literally 4 or 5. And so I determined with my kids, I was going to have that. And so I successfully have done that. And now even with them, if they have to miss for some weird reason, it drives them crazy. Like they're like, this doesn't feel right. Even when we've had an afternoon service on Sunday and then we don't go to church because we had Sunday school, Sunday morning, eat lunch, and then we do a Sunday afternoon service on the 5th Sunday of the month. If there's a 5th Sunday, it feels so weird. It's just not part of my culture to sit at home on a Sunday night. That's just not part of my culture. And for us, that's worked. It's helped raise children who love church and love the things of the Lord and want to be in church, and they feel weird if they're missing church. So that's one of the cultural things we wanted to do in our own home. But, be humble, admit your mistakes, take care of your heart and your mind first as mom. If you want to raise children who love the Lord, you need to love him first. Pray, read the Bible, let your kids see you reading the Bible. Always try to get better. And none of us have arrived. We all have room to grow. We all have room to get better. So always trying to be getting better. Now, another thing that I wanted to, and I'm like going really long. I did not think this was going to be very long, but here we are. I'm a talker, I guess. Words matter. Being a writer and being someone who has been fascinated by words since the time I could read. And I started reading when I was 4. And I still remember the name of my kindergarten teacher, which was crazy. And I went to school here in town because my mom was raised in Rock Falls. I went to a Faith Baptist Christian school across town, and I loved it. I loved going to school there. I loved learning to read. I remember the first summer I learned to read, my kindergarten teacher dropped off a huge stack of books to me. And I just remember sitting there, and we were living with my grandma at the time while we were building a house. And I remember sitting in the corner. I made my own little reading corner and just soaking up. And literally within a week, I'd read all those books. So words have always fascinated me. I love words. I've been writing since the time I was probably in 5th or 6th grade. I had another teacher, Roxanne Conlon. She really just cultivated that love for writing in me because we had to write papers every day for Monday. And while all the other kids hated it, I loved it. And it was my goal to get an A on every paper I wrote, because I'm firstborn, so overachiever, but I loved writing. And so words to me are very, very important. And you as a mom need to speak life into your husband and kids. Avoid sarcasm and cutting words because, and I've tried to tell my kids this, behind every joke, there is an element of truth. Even if someone's being sarcastic with you, watch what they're saying, because oftentimes there's an element of truth there. Teach your kids how to respectfully engage with others. And I'm not even talking about all the time with agreements. I'm talking about even through disagreements. We have lost the art in America to disagree with people. We have this cancel culture. And if someone doesn't agree with you, let's just cancel them, whatever it is. So teach your kids to respectfully engage with someone, even if they don't agree. And this comes down to teaching them not to call names, teaching them not to belittle someone else, not call people things like retard, which I don't even like that anyways. Um, insults. We've lost the art to just disagree. Excuse me, without calling insults. And I think that it shows a lack of intelligence. First of all, if you curse or swear, I think that shows a total lack of intelligence. That you can't think of a diabolical word other than that cuss word to get your point across, then that's just a lack of intelligence. But also to insult someone. If you can't come up with a reason why they're wrong, other than an insult, you're just showing your lack of intelligence for being able to dialogue in a way, right? So teach your kids how to respectfully engage with others. Watch the language in your home. If you come from a home that has cursing, Amanda's told the story before, my friend Amanda, she cursed a lot and she cussed a lot, and her husband didn't. And so when they got married, that was something that bothered him. So they came up with a curse jar. And every time she cursed, she had to put a quarter in or something. And I can't remember what they did with the money, but it made her intentional about the words coming out of her mouth. And sometimes if you're raised in that environment, it just comes out without you even thinking, right? So if you come from an environment where that's just in your head, you have to be very intentional about the words that come out of your mouth. So teach them how important words truly are. They often identify us to others. They show others if we're a Christian or not. Peter resorted to cursing when they were questioning if he was a follower of Jesus. And I always use that example with my kids. And it's stuck with them because his speech bewrayeth him, right? His speech was telling, and our speech is a tell. It's a tell if we're, a Christian. It's a tell on what our interests are, what our hobbies are. So it's very, very important. And then encourage your family, encourage your family, learn to speak truth and love. Sometimes we're going to need to be painfully honest with our children about shortcomings in their lives. We are there to teach them, to guide them. And I'm a firm believer in just confronting things when they need to be confronted, dealing with a problem when it pops up. But you can be very, very nasty with your words. Words have the power to cut someone down to where they're feeling like they have little worth. And you don't ever want to do that to your children. You don't want to ever break their will. It's good that your kids have a will because they're going to need it in this world that we live in. They're going to need a strong will. They're going to need a strong backbone to withstand all the foolishness in this world. You need to redirect their will. You need to show them this is why we do what we do. This is why we're a Christian. This is why we follow the word of God. This is what it is, what goes into being a disciple of Christ. Don't take joking too far with your kids. If the one being joked about isn't laughing, it's not funny. And that's what I've told my kids. I've said, joking turns into bullying when the one that you're joking about is not laughing. If they have a problem with it, it's now turned into bullying. So prioritize your family time when it comes to changing the culture in your home. Maybe you came from a home where you were a latchkey kid, or, your parents just weren't very involved in anything that you did. Well, you can do that. You can do differently for your own children. You can have traditions that only your family does. I'm a firm believer in taking vacations. You need a time set apart with just your family to make memories, to do fun things together, take day trips. In the summer, we always do a Lake Michigan trip. That's a fun summer tradition that we've come up with. Have family holidays and traditions. Make sure you have fun, but balance it with chores and life. And then just remember, when you're trying to change the culture in your home, you're in this for the long haul. Okay. This is not something that's going to be accomplished overnight. Moms of young kids, you're going to see the fruit eventually. Hang in there. It's coming, but have that goal, have that vision, and then work towards it. It's very fearful sometimes when you're a young mom and you've never raised kids. But now that I've raised half of my children, looking back, I'm more confident in the methods and madness, right, of the McMurtry home. I'm more confident in it. And so I'm parenting more out of a place of security and knowing what I'm doing is working rather than a place of insecurity and fear. And it's really nice when you can get to that point. And so That's why I'm trying to tell younger moms the things that have worked for me. And if it's worked for me, I'm sure it'll work for you too. And so one of the things is just years of consistency. Okay. You have to have years of consistency to build a good, godly family. It's the small decisions every day that lead up to those big moments in life. It's conquering the flesh day by day by day that lead to the big moments. Your kid doesn't just end up at the marriage altar pure by accident, by chance. It is not the roll of a die when it comes to raising kids. It's not, oh, well, it might happen, it might not. Nope. It's decision after decision after decision. It's the decision every day to keep your temper in check. It's the decision not to yell. It's the decision to do those devotions. It's the decision to train your kids from the time that they're little. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. This is what we do in the dating relationship. This is what we don't do. Now I've got younger kids that have seen us go through it a few times with our kids, and they kind of know what to expect now, right? And they see that it's possible to get to the marriage altar without even kissing until their wedding day, without holding hands, without having any type of physical relationship. And then they've seen how happy the marriage is afterwards, you know? So all of my kids have seen that. But it's not just something that voila happens by magic or happens by accident. It was decision after decision, goal after goal, planning after planning, doing this, not doing this, day in, day out, day in, day out, consistency. Staying true to what you are convicted by the Bible, and not wavering on that. Wise words build a home, but foolish words will destroy that home. Wise words when it comes to how you interact with your husband, how you interact with your children. You hold a lot of power in this little tongue in your mouth, a lot of power. In fact, most of the power in the home is directly related to the tongue. Nip bad habits in the bud. If you see something you don't like, maybe your kids are fighting a lot and you just don't want that stress in your home, nip it in the bud. If you see lying, nip it in the bud. If you see laziness, nip it in the bud. Remember your long-term goals. Have long-term goals. Don't just focus on the past or the present. So you messed up in the past. Okay, well, that's in the past. You have all of the time going forward. Today is a fresh new day with no mistakes in it yet. Okay. Tomorrow is a new day with no mistakes in it. Today, you can do better. You have to have a vision for your future family and what you want that to look like. Remember that relationships are the most important. Work through things. Don't give up. I'm seeing this new phenomenon in my generation. Of, like I'm technically millennial, but not really. I'm like more with the forgotten generation or whatever. But my parents in their 40s, okay, parents that generation. I am seeing just this lackadaisical, who cares if I have a relationship with my adult kids? Who cares if I don't? It is mind-blowing to me. I've seen it in extended family where relationships are cut off. No one even cares. The parents don't care. They just, oh, well, whatever. That's not going to fly for me. Like, I want a relationship with every single one of my children. And I have failed in some area if my children feel the need to cut me off. If they feel like they cannot have a relationship with me, I'm being too controlling. I'm being too harsh. I'm stepping over my boundaries. I'm stepping over my role that I'm supposed to play. You get to raise them. And then when they get married, that's their own family. And what they say goes. And you need to respect that. So, I'm watching situations where like there's just people are burning bridges left and right, and they have nothing to do with their grandkids when they're born because they've destroyed the relationship with their adult kids. And that's not okay. That's not okay. For me, when I got married, two most important relationships was my husband and my children. And they still are the most important relationships in my life. I don't care if I have a million friends, if I'm cut off from my kids. Like, I'm going to fix that relationship. I don't care what it takes. If I need to apologize 100 times, I'm going to apologize 100 times, but I'm going to make that right. I want to be an involved grandparent. I want to have an influence on the next generation. And I can't be an influence if I'm estranged from my adult kids. So relationships are the most important thing in my life. You don't always have to be right. You don't need to dig in over every little thing. Stop being so controlling. Let go. Realize that your adult children, especially, are their own family. They're their own entity, and you need to respect whatever they say. Learn to pick your battles even when raising your kids. You can make the home a war zone. And if you grew up in a home where every little thing became a battle and every little thing was a war, then do differently for your kids. You can have non-negotiables, like we're not moving the line on this. This is where we're standing firm. And then you can have negotiables, such as your daughter having her ears pierced, or fingernail polish, or wearing makeup at 16, or whatever it is, silly things that aren't going to determine the course of future generations. But them sleeping around before marriage, that's going to be hurtful to future generations. Them getting involved in drugs, them getting involved in alcohol, them just, stealing or committing felonies, that's going to affect future generations. Those are the things that you need to have hard lines on, not these other little trivial things. So lastly, small things that you can do, and I'm just going to go over these really quickly. Have fun with your kids. Laugh with your kids. Cut out the yelling. Cut out the strife in your home. Cut out the language. Cut out the cursing. Cut out just the stress and the anxiety, and just make your home a war zone. Love their dad and love him well. And that sets them up for success in their future marriage relationship. Watch your words. There's a lot of power in your tongue. Love your kids and make sure they know it. It's not about you when raising kids. Don't be self-centered. You're going to have time for the fluff and the other things and the side things and whatever later on. But right now, it's about pouring yourself into your kids. And yes, it's exhausting, but it is the most important work. If you have children right now and you're a stay-at-home mom, this is the most important work that you're doing, hands down, most important. And don't ever let someone make you feel like that's trivial or like you need to be doing more, you need to have a career. That's faulty information. That's not true. The next generation is the highest priority. This is important stuff. This is kingdom building stuff here. You have the ability to raise future little Christians who are going to be soldiers for the Lord and win other people to Christ. You have that opportunity, and do not take that for granted. And do not take it lightly. Have a life where God is in the middle of everything you do. He's in the middle of every decision. He's in the middle of every conversation. He's in the middle of every choice that you make for your family. Forgive and don't hold past mistakes against your kids or your husband. And that's going to cause bitterness. That's going to cause anger. That's going to cause a lot of things. And then you be the change. You have to be the change. You have to determine it. Moms, we have a lot of influence and we have a lot of power, and we are the one at the helm of the ship. And a lot of the way that we run the home is going to have a future impact on our children. We become the voice in their head as they grow up. And a lot depends on what we do in the home. So hopefully that was an encouragement. That's a cute idea, Raquel. She said this summer money's tight, so we tried to make summer fun with small things like movie morning with popcorn and candy after chores, and game night after evening cleanups. And so you're making fun memories for your kids. They're going to think back to the summer that we didn't have much money, but we spent the most time with each other that we've ever spent, right? And it's the same with us. Money's tight, but a trip to Lake Michigan is free. And you can go out there, let them play in the water, let them play in the sand. You can pack a lunch with what you have at home, which is what I'm probably going to do, and eat out of the cooler. And it's some of my kids' most fond memories of summer, the times that we've done that. So yes, definitely prioritize little things like that. You need to have someone left a comment, and I really appreciated it on one of the posts I just did about, go ahead and follow me on Facebook if you're not and you want to read my writings. Every post I do is pretty much public. I had to go to professional mode I had almost 400 followers that weren't my friends on Facebook. It's kind of funny to me that people will follow me, but they don't friend request me. So I'm always wondering, are they just following me to spy on me? Or why don't you friend request me if you're going to follow me? But anyways, I was going to lose all of them if I didn't go professional. So I went professional so I could keep all the followers just in case they wanted to follow me to see all my writings and things. I also have the blog at gentlyledsisters.com where I try to transfer almost all my writings to it. But I just did an art or a post about faith-led parenting versus fear-led parenting. And in it, someone left a comment and she said she was told that for every amount of correction that you do, you need to do twice as much encouragement and building up. And I've seen that true in my own kids' lives. You have the power to make your kids wilt like a little wilted flower that has no rain or no sun or no water. You have that ability as their mom, but you also have the ability to see them blossom. And yes, our kids need correction, but more than anything, they need to know that we love them. They need to know that they're special. They need to know that they have worth. They need to know that we love them no matter what. And I just told Hannah that the other day. I can't even remember what we were talking about. Oh, it was this Mommy Dearest game, which Kelly was trying to explain to me. You're supposed to ask, they're supposed to like, I'm supposed to ask Hannah what my favorite color is. And then if she gets it right, I'm supposed to say, Mommy Dearest loves you. But even when she got things wrong, I still said it because I told her, I'm like, I don't care if you get the wrong answer, Hannah. I'll always love you. So I'm going to say it anyways. And it was really cute seeing her face light up because our little kids need to be told that. They need to be told that they're secure in their parents' love for them because love covers a multitude of sins. And your kids will always try to please you if they know that you love them. And I'm a firm believer in that. So, anyways, I hope you have a great week. And this week's pretty empty for me. We're going to take a Lake Michigan trip later on, but it's pretty sparse what's going on, but that's good because my summer weeks are winding down and I'm going to be teaching piano here in about 3 weeks again. So kind of ready to get back on a schedule, but summer break is always nice. It's one of my favorite times of year. So go love God, go love your husband, and go love your kids and love them well. And you be the change in your home that you want.